He knocked me over. I landed on the dog bowl.
This One's Wife. Ashley Hansen exposes Meghan. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. You know from my work, and from those of you that have experienced narcissists yourself, that the narcissist will invariably devalue. The individual that gets this most is the intimate partner primary source, who experiences what is known as a sustained devaluation, which covers a range of horrific behaviours that I've covered in other works. But it's not just the intimate partner primary source that cops it. Intimate partner secondary sources, non-intimate secondary sources, such as friends and family, colleagues, neighbours, even non-intimate tertiary sources, strangers, members of the public, are not immune to the narcissist lashing out in some way. Whether it is a silent treatment, an unpleasant put-down, physical violence, triangulation in a malign fashion, the range of manipulations is long and detailed. In relation to this One's Wife, you know from my work that she will devalue people because that's what narcissists do. And we have seen various instances of her devaluing people where she's been caught on camera. We have also heard from people reporting about how she's a bully. For instance, the behaviour towards Princess Charlotte and towards Catherine, Princess of Wales, although, as you know, she tried to turn it around and make out that she was the one that was on the receiving end of unpleasant behaviour. There is the Sussex Survivors Club, those that worked with this One's Wife while she was in the United Kingdom that attest to her behaviours, which resulted in a report which has never been released, which investigated allegations of bullying against this One's Wife, which she naturally denied, denial being the first line of the twin lines of the narcissistic defence. She was accused of bullying in the United States. The Hollywood Reporter and Vanity Fair made reference to this. Hollywood Reporter memorably describing her as the dictator in high heels that could reduce a grown man to tears. There have been reports of her shouting at Harry, arguing with Harry, although how genuine those are in terms of actual evidence is questionable. Although it is the case, such behaviours will have occurred by virtue of the fact that she's a narcissist. Whether anybody actually ever heard that's another matter. But the fact is, there have been lots of different instances of people saying that she's unpleasant to be around, unpleasant to work with. We have sometimes seen snippets of this behaviour. But there hasn't really been anybody sitting down and explaining just how awful her behaviour was on a repeated basis and providing detail. That is, until now. Ashley Hansen, you may remember, was the global press secretary for this One's Wife and Harry. She joined as Archewell's media chief in May 2002, and she only lasted 18 months as she departed in December 2023. It was stated that thereafter she would no longer be working for this One's Wife, but through her new company that she set up, that they would be clients of hers. The separation, as is often the case with these things, made out as time to move on, enjoyed working for them, learned a lot, thank you for the opportunity, wish them well, etc., etc. All done for the purposes of ensuring that there is no public fallout. However, the impact of working for this One's Wife has been somewhat substantial on Ashley Hansen. I explained recently that in a short podcast she had given some further insight into just how she had been treated. Well, there's more. She'd spoken on the 15-minute Dear Media podcast, and she revealed basically how miraculously life had improved after working for this One's Wife and Harry. And I was able to explain with input from my PR expert just how that showed that if you are now delighted to be able to have a lie-in and delighted to be able to do certain other things, it just shows how unpleasant it was working for them. But Ashley Hansen has given more detail about what has actually happened to her, which exposes this One's Wife's behaviour further. This time, she's been involved in an hour-long podcast entitled "There is No Way to Change Everybody's Mind," says PR guru Ashley Hansen. The clear outcome from this, and this is something that I've discussed with my PR expert as well, is that working for this one's wife was not just a demanding job, it was indentured servitude, with a press release template that left her absolutely bruised and broken. Most PR professionals juggle hectic schedules, but Ashley Hansen wasn't just managing media. She was actually trapped in an endless cycle of damage control, crisis response, and explaining why the words privacy and Netflix docuseries do not belong in the same sentence. The behaviours of this one's wife, as you know, driven by her narcissism, resulted in her causing so many problems through collateral consequences, left Ashley Hansen engaging in this damage control and firefighting. Hansen describes a schedule that wasn't actually demanding, it was life-consuming. She explained that working for this one's wife meant that she couldn't take breaks, that she couldn't sleep in, and she couldn't even have a life of her own. This demonstrates the level of demand that was placed upon her by this one's wife, that it was all-consuming, that she was not only at this one's wife's beck and call, but because of the behaviour of this one's wife, basically causing shitstorms left, right and centre, she was running around, ordered and instructed to sort it out, to make it go away, to deal with it. Of course, if this one's wife had actually listened to the advice that she had received in the first place, these problems wouldn't have arisen. But she doesn't listen. Something which Hansen had alluded to on her departure in December 2023. What did she get in return for all of this dedication and firefighting? Did she get to control the message? Did she find that she could build a sustainable long-term PR strategy? No. She basically got to spend every waking moment catering to the whims of this one's wife, who believes that she is the message. Ashley Hansen reveals that she went through something called the Hoffman process. This is a week-long emotional healing retreat, and she did this about a year, so 6 months into her tenure, before she finally quit working for the Sussexes. The Hoffman process is the kind of thing people do when they realise they've lost themselves in toxic environments and basically need to claw their souls back from the abyss. Accordingly, she attends this Hoffman process realising that something in her life needs to change. Huge hint, it's the job you're doing. Then she finally quits. It took her 12 months from undertaking the Hoffman process to quitting to muster the courage, finalising exit strategies, and perhaps whether she still remembers how to sleep past dawn before she was able to do anything from it. What is evidenced in the podcast is that Ashley was, and still is to some extent, depressed and exhausted, not from general work stress, but because of working for this one's wife. She wasn't tired from having a demanding job. Hansen admits that she loves what she does very much. Having had a happy and successful career prior to this one's wife, she was mentally and emotionally depleted from dealing with this one's wife and Harry specifically. Imagine working for a client who, 1, demands total devotion because paying a PR person means owning them, apparently, which of course is the narcissistic perspective of this one's wife. 2, doesn't take advice. For instance, where Hansen suggested avoiding self-inflicted PR disasters, these suggestions were routinely ignored because this one's wife knows best. 3, this one's wife created crises of her own making and then complained about being in the news every single day, as if that wasn't the whole plan along, demonstrating the compartmentalization and hypocrisy and just how fucking difficult it was to deal with her as the PR advisor. Hansen in the podcast essentially describes a life where her entire existence was dictated by this one's wife whims, and also those of Harry. When she needed something, she had to drop everything. If they had a new victim narrative to push, that became her full-time job. Not her advising them, but her being dictated to by this one's wife as to, this is what you are doing. This one's wife repeatedly wanted to announce yet another new PR strategy instead of actually following through with the last one that was in place. In other words, she comes up with an idea, Hansen had to implement it. Before it could have any effect, this one's wife lost patience with it and wanted to implement a new one, something that we've seen repeatedly. Imagine that. You are the PR guru, you're told to do something, and whilst you're working hard on that, the boss immediately tells you, fuck that, do this instead. But hang on a minute, we haven't had a chance to implement it. Do as you're told. You don't know whether you're coming or going. What's also interesting is that Hansen drops quite a few intriguing details during the course of this podcast. First of all, she didn't actually have an office whilst working for the Sussexes. Instead, the team was summoned to gather at Hansen's house or somebody else's, where they would call in UK colleagues and set up what she dramatically refers to as a war room. What were they told to do? They were told to obsessively monitor the media and social channels for Sussex-related chatter. We know from the behaviour of this one's wife that she takes a keen interest in what is being said about her across mainstream media and social media. And she probably looks herself, but she'd also tasked her PR advisor and colleagues to establish a war room so that they could then spend their time looking for what was being said about this one's wife. That isn't using someone to advise in relation to PR strategy. It is to create an almost Orwellian overseer watching for what's said. And then, what they had to do, as a consequence of this one's wife's panicked reactions to what she would find being reported about her, they were instructed to launch swift counterattacks, which you often refer to as clapbacks. As you know from my work, when she's being criticised, which she finds out through this obsessive scrutiny, this threatens her need for control, with the consequence that the response that then comes about is through this one's wife instructing the nullification of threat to control through these clapbacks. Ashley Hansen also explains that when she went up to Monty Shitshow for meetings, the fact is the atmosphere was actually rather peaceful and calm and relaxing. Why? Because all of the shitstorm and firefighting was being done by Hansen, where she essentially kept it away from this one's wife. She explained that when she was working for this one's wife and Harry, she survived on tons of Red Bull, coffee and cigarettes. She explained that on the trips with them, she got food poisoning every single time. And, as a final touch of royal wisdom, Hansen reveals that this one's wife once taught her the life-changing, or perhaps figure-changing, secret of keeping chopped vegetables on the kitchen counter. You see, in that way, instead of reaching for crisps or chips, you can elevate your snacking habits with a curated crudité experience. There was no word about whether that insight from this one's wife made up for the daily PR meltdowns that Hansen was subjected to. After all of this, and the abuse that she was subjected to, the demands that were placed upon her, the firefighting that she was instructed to do, the monitoring that she had to undertake, the back and forth that occurred, the shifting through the strategies, the creation of one and then its binning and the moving on to the next, Hansen eventually departed. But is it the case that she's still working for the Sussexes, as had been suggested? Well, officially, her company 3 Gate Strategies was supposed to still have the Sussexes as a client. Unofficially, Well, what Hansen says in this podcast is a different story. She doesn't actually work for them. Nowhere in the hour-long conversation does she mention still working for them. Not once does she say, "Oh yes, I continue to be at their beck and call, sacrificing my mornings, my weekends, and my sanity." Or at the very least, "Oh yes, although I no longer slave at their shrine every waking moment, we're still working on some interesting projects together that are totally great and exciting." In fact, she only talks about the past experiences of working with them, not the current ones. Even more telling, she now talks about having learned to prioritize herself and not sacrificing her well-being for others. A clear reading between the lines there is that Ashley Hansen is now free of this one's wife. She doesn't work for them. They're not a client, and she's never going to go back. What this podcast underlines is the exposure of this one's wife by Ashley Hansen, and also the fact that some famous people don't need PR because they're naturally good at it, and some don't need PR because nothing can save them from themselves. This one's wife falls into the latter category. Ashley Hansen's story is a cautionary tale for PR professionals everywhere. There are demanding clients, there are difficult clients, and then there are clients who make you question your life choices so deeply that you need an emotional healing retreat to recover from how you've been treated, and you are even now, months after no longer working for this one's wife, still trying to crawl out of a shattered, depressed state. If your job makes you consider leaving society to live in the woods, it just might be time to quit, and Ashley Hansen did. She explained that what she was subjected to still makes it very hard for her, that she's still traumatized and is still some distance from a restored well-being, but at least she has escaped. This demonstrates the impact that this one's wife has with regard to her devaluing behaviours for the purpose of asserting control over the non-intimate secondary source that was her PR advisor. It reinforces once again what a bully she is to people behind closed doors, and the experience of Hansen are indeed a cautionary tale, demonstrating how this one's wife has no emotional empathy for those around her, least of all those that she orders around in her ceaseless campaign to make herself look good, despite her fouling it up time and time again. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.